Everyone at the royal party ignored the vampire king's crying daughter, too scared to go near. The waitress broke every rule when she knelt and gently wiped the child's tears. What she didn't know, that one act of kindness showed a forgotten power in her blood, and the king hasn't let her leave the palace since. The hanging lights above the red court cast a red glow across the ballroom, their crystals made from frozen blood that never melted. Laya had learned not to look up at them too long. 3 months working here, and she still couldn't get used to the way they seemed to beat like living hearts. She moved between tables with practiced silence, refilling cups with dark wine that smelled like metal and wrong. The nobles who lived forever barely noticed her. To them, humans were furniture that walked. More bread for table 7. Marcus, the head server, pushed a basket into her hands. And don't make eye contact. Lord Vesper complained about you last week. Laya nodded, keeping her head down. Eye contact was seen as a challenge among vampires. A human making eye contact could lose more than her job. The party hall buzzed with government gossip. Someone had turned against someone in the southern areas. A trade road had been taken. Mean words flew like knives across the tables, though everyone smiled with their sharp teeth showing. At the far end of the hall, on a raised platform of black marble, sat King Darius himself. Laya had only seen him from far away before. He looked exactly like the paintings, pale, skin that seemed carved from moonlight, dark hair swept back from a face too beautiful to be totally real, and eyes that held hundreds of years of boredom. He wore black and red robes that probably cost more than her whole village had earned in 10 years. He wasn't eating. He wasn't even pretending to listen to the old vampire whispering in his ear. He just stared ahead with the look of someone who had seen this same night 1,000 times before. Then Laya heard it, a small broken sound that didn't belong in a room full of hunters. A child crying. She turned her head a little, searching for the sound. There, at the edge of the platform, partly hidden by the king's throne, sat a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, with pale blonde curls and a black velvet dress that matched her father's robes. She held a stuffed bat toy to her chest, and quiet tears rolled down her cheeks. The whole hall had gone still. Laya realized with growing fear that every vampire in the room had noticed. They stood frozen, cups halfway to their lips, talks dying in the middle of a word. But no one moved. No one went closer. They just stared at the crying princess with looks ranging from fear to dislike to carefully blank faces. Even the king didn't react. He sat perfectly still, though his jaw had tightened so little you could barely see it. They're all too scared, Laya realized. No one dares go near a royal vampire, not even to comfort a child. The little girl's shoulders shook. Fresh tears spilled over her cheeks, and she made that sound again. A soft, sad cry that reminded Laya painfully of her youngest sister. She didn't think. Thinking would have stopped her. Laya set down her tray and crossed the ballroom floor. The whispers started right away, sharp and hissing like steam from a kettle. Someone grabbed at her sleeve, but she pulled away. Marcus's voice cut through the silence. "Stop. You can't." But Laya was already climbing the 3 steps to the platform. The king's eyes moved to her. Up close, they weren't just dark. They were endless, like staring into deep wells where something old lived at the bottom. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. Then the little girl cried again, and Laya remembered why she was there. She knelt beside Princess Serafina, pulling a clean cloth from her apron pocket. The child looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes that held far too much pain for someone so young. "Hey there," Laya whispered, keeping her voice soft and warm. "That's a very nice bat you have." Serafina blinked, surprised that someone had spoken to her. "His name is Shadow," the princess said quietly, her voice barely loud enough to hear. "Shadow is a perfect name." Laya gently wiped the tears from the child's cheeks, her touch light as a feather. "Do you know what my grandmother used to tell me when I cried?" The little girl shook her head. She said that tears are just the heart's way of speaking when words aren't enough. And that's okay. You're allowed to cry. Something changed in Serafina's face, like a door, opening just a crack in a locked room. She leaned slightly into Laya's touch, and more tears came. But these seemed different somehow, lighter. That's when Laya noticed the mark on the child's wrist. A black symbol, twisted and sharp like thorns, wrapped around her pale skin. It pulsed with a sickly light, and Laya felt cold just looking at it. But as she kept wiping the tears away, as she smiled at the girl and fixed her hair with gentle fingers, something impossible happened. The black symbol flickered. For just a heartbeat, the edges seemed to fade, turning from ink black to dark gray. Laya didn't see it clearly. She was focused on the child's face, but King Darius saw it. His eyes widened, and his hand gripped the arm of his throne so hard the wood cracked. "What are you?" he breathed, but the words were too quiet for anyone else to hear. The spell broke when Lady Morgana, the head advisor, swept forward with her red dress flowing like blood and water. "Seize her!" she commanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This human has touched the princess. She's broken sacred law." Guards appeared from the shadows, their hands reaching for Laya's arms. But before they could grab her, Serafina did something no one expected. She wrapped her small arms around Laya's neck and held on tight. "No," the princess said, her voice stronger than before. "She's nice. Don't take her away." The guards froze, unsure. You didn't forcefully pull someone from the princess's hug without permission. All eyes turned to King Darius. He rose slowly from his throne, and the whole room seemed to shrink when he spoke. His voice carried total power. "Let her go." Lady Morgana's face twisted. "But your majesty, she—" "I said, let her go." His eyes hadn't left Laya. "This woman will be kept under royal watch. Place her in the East Wing rooms. No one is to harm her or question her without my direct permission." He paused, and the ghost of something that might have been hope flickered across his old face. "We may have use for her yet." The whispers followed Laya through the marble hallways like hungry ghosts. 2 guards walked her to the East Wing, the part of the palace saved for guests. The king wanted to keep close, but not quite trust. Her new room was larger than her family's whole cottage, with a big bed covered in silver silk and windows that looked out on moonlit gardens. It was beautiful. It was also a cage. "Don't try the door," one guard said flatly. "It's watched. You leave when the king says you leave." The lock clicked behind them and Laya was alone. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking now, that the shock had worn off. What had she done? She'd broken the rules, touched a royal vampire, and somehow, the whole court had seen something in that moment that scared them. The mark on the princess's wrist. It changed. She hadn't imagined it. The black symbol had flickered when she touched Serafina like a candle flame disturbed by breath. But that was impossible. Laya was nobody. A waitress from a farming village who'd come to the capital looking for work after her father died. She had no magic, no special blood. Nothing that would explain what happened except her grandmother's words repeated in her memory. "Our family comes from old roots, Laya. The kind that remembers when humans and vampires weren't enemies. The Light Mother watches over us still." Laya had always thought it was just old woman talk, stories to make their poor life feel less meaningless. But now she wondered. She moved to the window and pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the gardens below, where night-blooming flowers opened like pale stars. Sleep found her there, still sitting by the window. And with sleep came the dream. 3 floors. Below, in a round tower room lit only by candles, King Darius spread old scrolls across his desk. He hadn't visited this room in many years. It had belonged to his father's father, the smart king, who had thought too much about prophecies and legends until he went crazy. The other vampires thought Darius had sealed it out of respect. They were wrong. He'd sealed it because some knowledge was dangerous. Now he broke those seals without stopping to think. The scrolls were older than most kingdoms, written in languages that had died hundreds of years ago. But Darius had lived through those hundreds of years. He remembered the words. His fingers traced over parts about the war of separation when vampires and humans had torn their friendship apart in blood and betrayal. Most focused on battles and agreements. But one scroll, old and yellowed, spoke of something else. In the final days before the breaking, there walked among us the tear healers of Solara. Born of human women blessed by the Light Mother, they carried caring as their weapon. Where they touched, curses loosened. Where they wept, darkness ran away. The last of their group died in the temple killing, and with them died the only bridge between fang and flesh. Darius's hand clenched. The temple killing. He'd been there hundreds of years ago. A young prince ordered by his father to help kill the healers before they could end the curse that gave vampires their power over humans. He remembered the temple burning, remembered the screams. He told himself it had to be done. That power required sacrifice. But now his daughter lay dying from that same curse, the one that marked royal vampire children, feeding on their life energy to keep the forever living strength of their family line. Serafina had maybe a year left. He had asked every dark magician, every blood wizard. None could break it. Until tonight, when a human waitress with gentle hands had made the impossible symbol flicker. Could she be related to them? He wondered. Could the tear healer's family line have survived? He pulled out another scroll, this one describing the healer's powers. They draw power from understanding feelings, turning caring into pure light. Their touch does not destroy darkness. It remembers what lived before the darkness came. They do not heal wounds. They remind the wounded of being whole. At the bottom of the scroll was a faded picture. A woman with kind eyes, her hands glowing with soft light as she touched a kneeling vampire's face. The vampire was crying. Darius stared at that picture for a long time. Then he rolled up the scrolls and put out the candles. His mind was made up. Whatever Laia was, whatever power she carried, he would unlock it, even if it meant facing truths he'd buried for hundreds of years. His daughter's life depended on it. In her dream, Laia walked through ruins. Moonlight poured through broken pillars of white stone, lighting up wall paintings that time had nearly erased. She saw pictures of humans and vampires standing together, their hands joined, not as master and servant, but as equals. At the center of the ruins stood a pool of still water, perfectly round, reflecting stars she didn't recognize. A woman appeared on the opposite side, tall and bright with eyes that held both sadness and endless kindness. "You forgot," the woman said, her voice like wind through leaves. "But your blood remembers. Only caring breaks blood. Only love ends what hate began." "I don't understand," Laia whispered. "You will," the woman smiled sadly. "The child is dying, Laia, and you're the only one who can save her. But first, you must remember who you are." Laia woke with tears on her cheeks and a single word burning in her mind. Solara. Laia spent the whole next day alone in her room, pacing between the window and the door. Servants brought food on silver trays, but she could barely eat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that ruined temple and the woman made of light. Solara. The word felt familiar, like a song she'd forgotten, but her heart still knew. As evening fell, painting the sky deep purple, the door finally opened. It wasn't a guard. It was King Darius himself. up close without the crowd of nobles around them. He seemed different. Still scary, still old and powerful. But there was something raw in his expression, something almost human. "Come with me," he said quietly. "Please." The please surprised her more than anything. Kings didn't say please to servants. She followed him through winding hallways she didn't recognize, going deeper into the palace. They passed no guards, no servants. Whatever this was, he wanted no witnesses. He stopped at a door painted with silver stars and moons. A child's door. "My daughter hasn't laughed in 3 years," Darius said without looking at her. His hand rested on the door handle, but he didn't open it yet. The curse feeds on joy. Every moment of happiness she feels, it eats it. So, she stopped feeling happiness altogether. She stopped trying. His voice cracked on the last word, and Laia saw something she never thought possible. A vampire king on the edge of breaking. "Last night, after you left," she smiled. "Just for a moment. It's been so long. I almost didn't recognize the look." He finally turned to face her, and his eyes held desperate hope. "I need to know if it was real. If you can truly affect the curse. Will you try again?" Laia's throat felt tight. "I don't know what I did. I don't know if I can repeat it. Try anyway. Please." There was that word again. He opened the door. Princess Serafina's room was exactly what Laia expected, filled with toys and books, beautiful wall hangings showing fairy tales, a bed shaped like a castle. But the little girl sitting in the middle of it all looked small and gray, like a flower slowly dying in darkness. Until she saw Laia. "You came back!" Serafina's face lit up. "Father said you might not. He said I shouldn't hope, but I did anyway." Laia's heart squeezed. She crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "Of course I came back. I promised Shadow I'd visit, didn't I?" The stuffed bat sat on the pillow, and Serafina giggled, a sound like bells that made even the king breathe in sharply. "Hold her hand," Darius said from the doorway, his voice carefully controlled. "If you're willing." Laia looked at Serafina. "May I?" The princess nodded and held out her small hand, the one with the black symbol wrapped around her wrist like poisonous vines. The moment their fingers touched, something changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no flash of light, no thunderclap, but Laia felt warmth flow through her. The same warmth she'd felt when comforting her siblings, when helping her grandmother care for sick neighbors, when holding her father's hand as he died. It was the warmth of caring about someone else's pain more than your own. Comfort. The black symbol began to glow, not with darkness, but with light trapped inside darkness, like stars behind storm clouds. Serafina gasped. "It doesn't hurt, Papa. It doesn't hurt." And then she laughed. It was pure and bright and totally joyful, the laugh of a child who'd forgotten what it felt like to be happy. She threw her arms around Laia's neck and laughed until tears streamed down her face. Good tears this time, ones that washed away pain instead of showing it. Darius made a sound like he'd been struck. He crossed the room in 3 steps and knelt beside the bed, his hand reaching out to touch his daughter's face as if making sure she was real. "Serafina," he whispered, and his voice broke completely. "I'm okay, Papa," she said, still giggling. "I'm actually okay." For several minutes they stayed like that, father and daughter holding each other while Laia kept her hand in Serafina's, keeping the connection that held the curse back. Finally, Darius looked up at Laia with a look of wonder and fear. "Guards," he called out. "Leave us. Seal the hallway. No one enters for any reason." Footsteps moved away, and they were alone. "Who are you?" he asked Laia. "Truly." "I'm nobody, just a waitress." "No." He stood, helping his daughter settle back against her pillows. The symbol had faded back to black, but it looked lighter somehow, less solid. What you just did. It's impossible. Unless... He studied her face like he was searching for something. Your family. Where do they come from? A farming village. 3 days' ride south. Before that, your grandparents. Great-grandparents. Laia frowned, trying to remember. My grandmother never spoke much about her past. She was always secretive about it. But she used to pray every morning to someone she called the Light Mother. She'd say our family was blessed, that we had old blood in our veins. Darius went very still. The Light Mother. You know it? I know it, he said quietly. It's what the Order of Solara called their goddess. The healers who could break curses with caring alone. He looked at her with new eyes. They were all killed hundreds of years ago. Or so we thought. What are you saying? I'm saying, Laia, that you might be the last of them. The last tear healer in the world. The words hung in the air like a prophecy, and somewhere deep in Laia's chest, something old and sleeping began to wake. The dreams came every night after that, growing stronger and clearer. In them, Laia walked through the same moonlight ruins, but each time she saw more details. The wall paintings on the broken pillars showed stories. A vampire child healed by gentle hands. A human village saved from sickness by immortal strength. 2 peoples building something beautiful together. Before the breaking, Laia thought in the dreams, somehow knowing the words were true. Before we forgot how to love each other. On the 3rd night, the woman made of light appeared again. But this time she didn't speak. She just pointed to something carved into the stone floor, a symbol that looked like a teardrop held by hands with a sun rising behind it. Find the truth, the woman whispered as the dream began to fade. Find yourself. Laia woke gasping. The symbol burned into her mind's eye. She'd spent 3 days in the palace now, mostly stuck in her room. Darius visited each evening, bringing Serafina with him. Each time Laia held the child's hand, the princess grew stronger, more alive. The black symbol was definitely fading. Not gone, but lighter, like ink washing away in rain. But Darius had said nothing more about the Order of Solara. He watched Laia with careful, planning eyes, clearly struggling with some decision he wasn't ready to share. Laia was tired of waiting. If she truly was related to these tear healers, if she truly carried their power, then she needed to understand what that meant. And there was only one place in the palace that might hold those answers: the royal library. Marcus, the head server, who'd been surprisingly kind to her despite everything, had mentioned it once. 3 floors of books going back 1,000 years. The king never goes there anymore. Says it reminds him of things better left forgotten. Things better left forgotten were exactly what Laia needed to find. She waited until the early hours of dawn when even vampires grew sleepy and guards changed shifts. The door to her room wasn't locked anymore. Darius had removed that rule after the 2nd night. She slipped into the hallway wearing a borrowed cloak, moving with a silence she'd learned as a waitress. The library wasn't hard to find. She followed, the smell of old paper and dust, climbing a spiral staircase that seemed to go on forever. The doors were huge and carved with scenes of battle, but they opened silently at her touch. Inside, rows of shelves stretched into darkness, lit only by dying candles and wall lights that probably hadn't been changed in months. The air tasted stale and forgotten. Laia began searching, running her fingers along leather spines, squinting at titles written in languages she couldn't read. How am I supposed to find anything in this maze? Then she saw it. A door at the far end of the library, partly hidden behind a wall hanging. Something pulled her toward it, the same strange tugging she'd felt in her dreams. The door was locked, but when she touched the handle, it clicked open as if it recognized her. Impossible, she thought. But she'd stopped believing in impossible 3 days ago. The room beyond was small and round, its walls covered completely in wall paintings. And these weren't old and faded. They'd been kept safe somehow, still bright with color despite being very old. Laya's breath caught. The wall paintings showed the same scenes from her dreams. The temple, the pool of starlit water, humans and vampires living together in peace. And in the center of the largest painting, painted with such care that every detail seemed alive, was a woman. She wore white robes and held her hands stretched out, glowing with soft light. Her face was kind and strong, with dark hair falling past her shoulders. Around her, both humans and vampires knelt, not in worship, but in thanks. Beneath the painting, words were carved in a language Laya didn't know, but somehow understood. The first oracle of tears. She who remembered love when all chose hate, mother of caring, founder of Solara. Laya stepped closer, her heart pounding. The woman's face. It was like looking in a mirror. Not exactly the same. This woman was older, wiser, but the likeness was clear. The same eyes, the same shape of jaw, the same small tilt to her smile. "It's you," Laya whispered to the painting. "You're the one in my dreams. And you," a sharp voice said behind her, "are somewhere you absolutely should not be." Laya spun around. Lady Morgana, the head advisor, stood in the doorway with 2 guards beside her. Her red dress seemed darker in the candlelight, like drying blood. "The hidden oracle's room," Morgana said, her voice dripping with hate. "Sealed by royal order for 300 years. Only those of the bloodline can open its door." Her smile was all teeth. "You've just proven what I feared. You're not just some peasant girl. You're a threat to everything we've built." "I'm not a threat to anyone." "Guards, seize her. The king will want to know that his little experiment has been raiding forbidden." "The king," Darius's voice cut through the room like a blade, "is already aware." He stood in the main library beyond, his face unreadable. But his eyes found the painting, found Laya standing before her, Ancestor's picture, and something changed in his expression. Understanding, recognition, and fear. "Leave us," he commanded. "All of you." "Your Majesty." She opened a sealed door. "Leave us." Morgana's face twisted with anger, but she bowed stiffly and left, the guards following. When they were alone, Darius entered the hidden room and stared at the painting for a long moment. "I painted this," he said quietly, 300 years ago, from memory. I wanted to remember her face before time stole it from me. He looked at Laya. "I never thought I'd see it again. Not on a wall, not in life. You knew her? The first oracle?" "I killed her," Darius whispered. "And now her blood has returned to save my daughter from the very curse I helped create." Darius's confession hung in the air between them like smoke. "You killed her." Laya's voice shook, but not just with fear. Anger mixed with something deeper. Sadness for an ancestor she'd never known. Rage for a killing she'd only learned about days ago. "I was young, following orders." Darius stared at the painting, unable to meet Laya's eyes. "My father commanded it. He said the tear healers made us weak, that their caring was poison to vampire strength. We burned the temple, every healer inside. I told myself it was necessary. And now I would give anything to undo it." His fists clenched. "But the past is written in blood, and blood doesn't wash away. All I can do is—" The door burst open. Not just Morgana this time. 7 vampires swept into the library like a storm. Their formal robes marked them as the Vampire Council, the old lords and ladies who ruled alongside the king. Lord Vesper led them, his face twisted with disgust. "Your Majesty," he said, the title sounding like an insult. "We must speak, now. This is not the time." Word has spread throughout the court. Lady Morgana stepped forward, her voice sharp with victory. You protect a human with divine powers, a descendant of the Solara Order, the very family line we killed to protect our rule. Another council member, Lord Theron, pointed a blaming finger at Leia. She's corrupting the princess, weakening the royal curse that holds our power structure together. If the curse breaks, the whole foundation of vampire society falls apart. My daughter is dying from that curse, Darius said, his voice dangerously quiet. Then she dies with honor. Lord Vesper slammed his staff against the floor. Better that than dirtying our pure bloodline with human feelings. This girl must be executed, immediately, tonight. Laia's blood ran cold. You will not touch her. Darius moved to stand between Laia and the council, his presence suddenly overwhelming. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. We are not asking for permission, Morgana hissed. The council has voted, 6-1. The human dies, or we remove you from the throne and kill her anyway. On what grounds? Treason, witchcraft, endangering the immortal realm? Lord. Vesper smiled coldly. Pick whichever you prefer for the execution order. Darius's hand went to the sword at his hip, a weapon Leia hadn't even noticed he was carrying. I am still your king. A king who's grown soft, Theron sneered, blinded by fatherly love. You would sacrifice hundreds of years of vampire rule for one child. Yes. The single word silenced them all. I would burn this entire court to ash for my daughter, Darius continued, his voice carrying total certainty. And if you think you can stop me, then try. The tension crackled like lightning about to strike. Then, from somewhere deep in the palace, a scream shattered the silence, a child's scream full of pain. Seraphina! Darius ran from the library, Laia racing behind him. The council followed, their threats forgotten for a moment. They found the princess in her room, collapsed on the floor, shaking. The black symbol had returned stronger, darker than ever, spreading up her arm like poison ivy. Black veins spread from it, crawling toward her heart. Papa, she sobbed, her small body shaking with pain. It hurts. It hurts so much. Laia dropped to her knees beside the child, reaching for her hand. But the moment she touched the symbol, pain shot through her own body. She cried out, but didn't let go. It's fighting back, she gasped. The curse knows I've been weakening it. It's trying to... Seraphina screamed again, and blood began trickling from her nose. See? Morgana's voice was ice. The human's meddling has made it worse. The curse will kill the princess now, eating her completely because it's been threatened. Kill the girl and the curse stabilizes. No! Seraphina clutched Laia's hand even as pain shook them both. Don't let them take her. Please, Papa. Darius looked between his dying daughter and the council surrounding them, and Laia saw the moment he made his choice. Marcus, he roared. The head server appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. Prepare 3 horses. Food for a week. Pack light and fast. Darius scooped his daughter into his arms, and Laia saw that the black veins were still spreading. We leave within the hour. Your Majesty, you cannot... I can and I will. He turned to face the council, his eyes blazing with power that made even the old vampires step back. I'm taking my daughter and Laia to the sunken cathedral. The original curse seal is there. If there's any way to end this for good, we'll find it. The sunken cathedral is forbidden, Lord Vesper sputtered. The spirit guardians will kill you. Then I'd die trying to save my child instead of living as a coward. Darius looked at Laia. Will you come? She stared at Seraphina, still crying in pain, and thought of the first oracle in her dreams. Only caring breaks blood, yes. Then we have no time. The council will send assassins before dawn. He walked toward the door, then paused. And anyone who tries to stop us will learn why I've ruled for 500 years. The threat hung in the air as they raced from the room. Behind them, Morgana's voice cut through the chaos. So be it. The king has chosen treason. Hunt them down. Kill the human. Bring the princess back in chains. The hunt had begun. They filled the palace under a moonless sky. 3 horses galloping into darkness while alarm bells rang behind them. Seraphina rode with her father, wrapped in his cloak, her face pressed against his chest. Laia rode beside them, her untrained hands gripping the rein-stew tight. She'd never ridden a horse before yesterday, when Marcus had given her a hurried lesson in the stables. "They'll send blood trackers," Darius said as they dove into the forest beyond Thessaly walls. "They can follow our scent for miles. We need to reach the River of Sorrows by dawn and cross it. The running water will hide our trail." Laia's thighs already ached from riding, but she pushed the horse faster. Behind them, she could hear hunting horns, a sound that made her blood freeze. They rode for hours through twisted trees that seemed to lean in with grabbing branches. Twice they heard howls that were definitely not wolves. Once eyes shined red from the bushes, but Darius just showed his fangs, and the creature melted back into shadow. By the time they reached the river, Seraphina was burning with fever. "The curse is speeding up," Darius said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. He laid his daughter on the riverbank while Laia collapsed beside them. Every muscle screamed. Being separated from the palace, from the source of vampire power, it's making everything worse. "Let me try something." Laia placed her hands on both sides of Seraphina's face. The little girl's skin felt like fire. In my dreams, the oracle didn't just touch. She gave something. Warmth, light. "Let me try." She closed her eyes and thought of everything she loved about this child. Her brave smile, her gentle heart, the way she'd held on to Laia, even when everyone else told her to let go. She thought of her own sister at that age, of every child who deserved to grow up without pain. Something stirred deep in her chest, a warmth that grew and grew until it spilled down her arms, into her palms, flowing into Seraphina like water into dry earth. The black symbol began to glow, but this time with golden light pushing back the darkness. Seraphina's eyes fluttered open. "It's warm," she whispered, "like sunshine. I haven't felt sunshine in so long." The fever broke. The black veins pulled back slightly. It wasn't a cure. The curse still crawled beneath her skin, but it bought them time. Darius stared at Laia with something like awe. "You're channeling it, the tear healer power. You're actually learning to control it." "I don't know what I'm doing," Laia admitted. "I just feel what she needs and try to give it." That's exactly what they did. The Order of Solara. He looked away. I'd forgotten what it looked like. Real caring. Not the planned mercy we vampires practice when it helps us, but real care for another's suffering. They crossed the river at dawn and continued into the mistwood, a forest so thick with fog that Laia couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Here they found their first village. It was small, barely a dozen buildings, lived in by humans who lived in the wild spaces between vampire lands. They looked half-starved and tired, but when they saw Seraphina's condition, an old woman brought water and bread without being asked. "Poor child," she murmured, brushing hair from the princess's face. "So young to carry such darkness." "We can pay," Darius began, reaching for his coin purse. "Keep your money, vampire." The woman's voice wasn't cruel, just tired. "I had a daughter once. She didn't survive her sickness. I won't turn away another mother's child, no matter who her father is." Laia saw something crack in Darius's expression. He nodded silently, accepting the kindness he likely didn't think he deserved. They rested for an hour before moving on. As they prepared to leave, a boy no older than 12 tugged on Laia's sleeve. "Miss, there are blood trackers 2 hours behind you. I saw them from my tree post. You should hurry." "Thank you," Laia said, pressing a coin into his hand. "Anyway," the boy looked at it, then at Darius. "You're theeking, aren't you? I've seen your face on the tax papers." Darius tensed, hand moving to his sword. "I won't tell," the boy said quickly. "My sister says you're cruel, but anyone who runs to save their kid instead of sacrificing them to stay powerful. Maybe you're learning not OB." He ran away before Darius could answer. They rode harder after that. Laia channeling warmth into Seraphina every few hours to keep the curse back. With each healing, she felt stronger, more certain. The power wasn't strange anymore. It was waking up, remembering itself through her. On the 3rd night, they helped a traveling vampire merchant whose carriage had broken down. He didn't recognize Darius in his travel-stained clothes, and Laia watched the king work alongside, her toe fix the wheel, his immortal strength making short work of the job. "You're kind for humans," the merchant said to Laia, thinking Darius was her husband. "And you, sir, are quite strong for a human." After he left, Darius was quiet for a long time. "I've ruled for 500 years, he finally said as they made camp. "I've commanded armies, made agreements, executed traitors, but I've never fixed a stranger's carriage just because it was the right thing to do. I'd forgotten that was even an option." "It's never too late to remember," Laia said softly. On the 4th day, through the clearing mist, they saw it. The sunken cathedral rose from the earth like a broken prayer, half its towers buried, its walls covered in creeping vines that glowed faintly in the twilight. Around its edge, see-through figures drifted, spirit monks still walking their old paths, bound to guard the cursed seal even in death. "We're here," Darius whispered. Serafina stirred in his arms. "Papa, I can feel something old and angry." "The source of the curse," Laia sighed, that strange knowing rising in her again. The place where it all began. They had arrived at the heart of darkness. Now they had to find the light within it. The spirit monks didn't attack right away. They just watched as Darius, Laia, and Serafina walked toward the cathedral's huge doors. The ghosts' faces held no anger, only endless sadness, as if they'd been waiting hundreds of years for someone to finally end their watch. "They're trapped," Laia realized. "Bound by the same curse they're guarding." One monk, the tallest, with a face that might have been kind in life, pointed toward the entrance. An invitation, not a threat. The doors groaned open. Inside, the cathedral was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Shattered stained glass covered the floor like fallen stars. The seats had crumbled into dust. But at the far end, somehow untouched by time, stood an altar carved from white stone. Above it, a single beam of moonlight broke through the ruined ceiling, lighting up a round seal set into the floor. The moment they stepped toward it, Serafina shook. "Papa!" Blood poured from her nose. "Hearers!" The black symbol exploded across her whole body, wrapping around her throat like strangling hands. I can't breathe." "No." Darius fell to his knees, holding his daughter as she shook. "Not now. We're so close." Laia rushed forward, but when she tried to channel her warmth, the curse lashed back. Pain exploded through her head, driving her to the ground. The curse was too strong here, too close to its source. "Laia," Serafina's voice was fading. "I'm scared." "I know, sweetheart. I know." Tears blurred Laia's vision as she crawled toward them. Then the light came. It bloomed from the altar like a flower opening, coming together into a shape Laia recognized right away. The woman from her dreams, the first oracle of tears clearer than ever, her presence filling the ruined cathedral with warmth that pushed back the shadows. "You came," the spirit said, her voice echoing with joy and sadness mixed together. "After all this time, my blood returned." "Helfer," Darius begged. And Laia had never heard a vampire sound so broken. "Please, whatever price you want, I'll pay it. Just save my daughter." "The price was already paid," the oracle said, turning to him. 500 years ago, when you burned my temple, when you killed my sisters, when you chose power over love." Darius bowed his head. "I know, and I deserve to be damned for it. Perhaps, but your daughter does not." The oracle knelt beside Serafina, her see-through hand hovering over the child's face. "Listen well. The curse you think is magic, it is not. It never was." "What?" Laia struggled to understand. "But the symbol, the dark power, are the shapes of something far older than magic." The oracle's eyes held ancient pain. "The curse was born from revenge. When you killed us, Darius, one of my sisters survived long enough to speak a dying wish. Not a spell, a truth." She stood, her shape flickering like a candle flame. She said, "Those who rule through fear will feed their children to that fear. Those who choose power over caring will watch their family line consume itself." It wasn't magic. It was prophecy. The universe simply agreed. Darius looked stunned. Then how to weaned it? The same way it began, with a choice. The oracle looked between them. One of royal vampire blood and one of Solara blood must share an act of pure caring. Not planned mercy, not love given expecting something in return. Pure selfless caring. Everything that was murdered in this place. Serafina's breathing grew shallow. The black veins were reaching her heart. "We're running out of time." Laia's hands shook. Then choose quickly, the oracle said, beginning to fade. Remember, child of my blood, you cannot destroy darkness. You can only remind it of the light it once was. And she was gone. Laia looked at Seraphina, this little girl who'd done nothing to deserve this fate. She thought of all the children like her, suffering from curses they didn't create, paying for the sins of their ancestors. I understand, she whispered. She crawled to Seraphina and carefully lifted the child's head into her lap. The curse burned against her skin, trying to push her away, but Laia held on. She held the dying princess like she'd held her own baby sister during thunderstorms, like her mother had once held her. It's okay, she murmured, smoothing Seraphina's sweat-soaked hair. You're not alone. You're never alone. And then, because her heart was breaking for this child, because she truly couldn't bear to watch her suffer, Laia cried. A single tear fell onto the black symbol on Seraphina's wrist. Where it landed, light bloomed. Blood, Darius breathed, suddenly understanding. It needs blood and tears. Vampire and human. Power and caring. Together. Without stopping to think, he bit his own palm and pressed it over the place where Laia's tear had fallen. The reaction was instant. Light and shadow exploded outward, not fighting but joining. Darkness, remembering it had once been light. Power, remembering it had once served love. The black symbol shattered like glass, and where it had been, a new mark appeared. A teardrop held by hands with a small sun rising behind it. The symbol from Laia's dreams. The mark of Solara. Seraphina gasped, her eyes flying open. The black veins vanished. Color returned to her cheeks. Papa, she whispered. It doesn't hurt anymore. Around them, the spirit monks began to dissolve. Their faces finally at peace. Their watch was over. The curse had ended, not with destruction, but with the remembering of what had been lost. The simple, deep truth that caring was stronger than revenge. That love in the end always won. 6 weeks later, something impossible happened in the vampire lands. The sun rose. Not the pale, filtered twilight that vampires put up with, but actual golden sunlight. The first true dawn seen in the Red Court lands in 3 generations. When the first rays touched the palace courtyard, the vampires didn't burn. The old curse that had forced them into shadow had lifted with Seraphina's healing, as if the two had always been connected. Darius stood at his window, watching light paint the world in colors he'd forgotten existed, and felt something he hadn't felt in 500 years. Hope. In the courtyard below, Seraphina loved, a sound that had become wonderfully common, as she chased butterflies through the garden. The mark on her wrist glowed faintly golden in the sunlight, no longer a curse but a reminder, a symbol of the day everything changed. Your Majesty, Marcus appeared in the doorway. Their representatives have arrived. Both groups. Already? I thought we had another hour. They're eager, sire. Word of the Unity Council has spread far. Everyone wants to see if it's real. Darius smiled slightly. Then let's not keep them waiting. The Grand Hall had been changed. Gone were the hanging lights of frozen blood crystals, replaced by ordinary candles and oil lamps. The throne remained, but beside it now sat 2 extra chairs. One for the human representative, one for the newly named High Oracle of Unity. Laia still wasn't used to that title. She stood in her rooms, no longer the servants' quarters, but rooms that fit her position, fixing the white robes that felt too formal, too important. The symbol of Solarawa sewn over her heart in gold thread. You look terrified, Seraphina said from the doorway, grinning. The princess visited her every morning now, sometimes for lessons, sometimes just to talk. I am terrified, Laia laughed shackily. 6 weeks ago I was serving wine. Now I'm supposed to teach vampire and human healers how to channel caring into power. What if I can't do it? You'll do it the same way you saved me. Seraphina took her hand, the gesture now familiar and comforting, by caring more about helping people than about being afraid. Wise words from a 6-year-old. Together, they walked to the Grand Hall. The gathering was unlike anything Laia had seen. 50 representatives filled the room. 25 vampires, 25 humans, all seated together at long tables. No separation, no order of importance. When Darius had given the order remaking the Red Court into a council of peace, half his own advisors had quit in protest. Lady Morgana and Lord Vesper had fled to the southern lands, gathering those who refused to accept the new order. There would be resistance, perhaps even war eventually. But today, in this room, peace was possible. Welcome, Darius said, his voice carrying power that no longer relied on fear. "We gather today not as masters and servants, but as two peoples learning to remember what we once knew. That our strength lies in unity, not in control." He motioned to Laia, who stepped forward, her heart pounding. "The High Oracle of Unity will now explain the healing programs we're starting in both lands." Laia took a breath and began. She spoke of training centers where humans with Solara blood, and they'd found 12 so far, descendants who'd hidden their gifts, would teach healing through feeling. She explained how vampire strength and human caring could work together, each helping the other. As she spoke, she saw doubtful faces slowly soften. Not everyone. Some vampires still sneered. Some humans still jumped when vampires moved too quickly. But it was a start. After the formal speeches ended, the real work began. Groups forming, supplies being handed out, nervous handshakes between old enemies. Laia moved through the crowd, answering questions, showing small healings, showing both peoples that caring wasn't weakness. It was the strongest magic that existed. As evening fell and the first stars appeared, she found herself alone on the eastern balcony, tired but satisfied. "You did well today." Darius joined her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. He offered her one. "The human delegates trust you. Even some of the vampires are starting to. It's not enough. Not yet. Rome wasn't built in a day, neither will our new world be." He looked out over the city, where lanterns were lighting in both vampire and human areas. "I've made many announcements today, but there's one I wanted you to hear first." He turned to face her fully. "I'm changing the kingdom's motto. The old one was power through eternity. The new one will be, power is eternal, only when caring guides it." Laia felt tears prick her eyes. The first oracle would approve. "I hope so. I hope." She stopped, staring at Laia's face. "What? What is it?" "Behind you," he whispered. Laia turned. There, faint as moonlight, the spirit of the first oracle stood at the balcony's edge. She wasn't solid, more like a memory given a body for a moment. Other smile was bright and real. She looked at Laia with endless pride, then at Darius with forgiveness he never thought he'd receive. And then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper on the wind. "The curse ended the moment you wiped her tears. Everything else was just the world catching up to what caring had already made true." And with that, she faded, her purpose finished, her watch finally over. Laia touched her cheek and found it wet, but these were good tears, the kind that came from joy, from relief, from knowing that sometimes against all odds, broken things could be made whole again. In the courtyard below, Seraphina's laughter rang out like bells, and for the first time in 500 years, King Darius laughed.